Marin, there is no shame in being a poor housewife. Every emperor needs someone to make sure the table is set. Callan Rove, 38-year-old executive heir of Rove Harlan Group and husband of Marin Vale Rove, said it with a calm smile while sitting beside Brielle Say, 33-year-old image consultant and his rich mistress, in the chair that had been approved for his wife. The chandelier lights caught the diamond bracelet on Brielle's wrist, the same bracelet Callan had secretly bought for her, and the guests around the luxury pre-signing reception went quiet. Marin Vale Rove, 35-year-old quiet wife of Callan Rove, stood near the service entrance in a plain black dress, holding her pain behind a calm face. She had arrived that morning to help her husband prepare for the biggest presentation of his life. She had caught a dangerous mistake in his financial slides before Vera Stone Dominion's analysts saw it, and she had protected him from looking dishonest in front of the company about to sign his family's $10 billion deal. But by evening, Callan sat beside his mistress and mocked the same wife who had saved him. Seela Rove, 61-year-old mother of Callan Rove and mother-in-law of Marin Vale Rove, smiled like the insult was deserved. Callan is right, she said softly. Marin has a good heart, but a woman like her belongs at home, not beside a $10 billion future. Torin Rove, 65-year-old patriarch of Rove Harlan Group and father of Callan Rove, raised his glass and added, "Every powerful family needs someone humble enough to keep the house warm while real leaders build the empire." Brielle lowered her eyes with a sweet, victorious smile, sitting proudly in Marin's place, while Callan's parents laughed quietly around her. Then Callan looked at Marin again and said, "You were never built for rooms like this. You would not understand what this deal means." Marin looked at him, waiting for one word of protection. He gave her none. What Callan did not know was that Marin secretly owned Vera Stone Dominion, the very company about to sign his family's $10 billion deal. He did not know Osric Hale, 59-year-old chairman of Vera Stone Dominion and trusted corporate ally of Marin Vale Rove, had already seen enough to question the character of the family standing at the edge of a life-changing contract. He did not know Kara Von, 40-year-old corporate attorney for Marin Vale Rove, had begun quietly tracing the strange payments connected to Brielle. Marin did not scream, she did not beg, she did not reveal herself. She let Callan keep thinking she was small because people expose their true character when they believe power is not watching. Weeks later, the final contract returned. Callan expected victory. His parents expected billions. Brielle expected to stand beside the future she thought she had stolen. But one demand from the true owner changed the room so completely that the same family who mocked Marin as a poor housewife began trembling before the signature they never knew she controlled. Stay until the end, because the woman they pushed aside was the same woman holding power over everything they celebrated. Subscribe now and comment loyalty if loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness. Also tell us where you are watching from. The first mistake on the screen could have destroyed Callan Rove before the sun even came up. It glowed in bright white numbers across the largest screen inside the private conference center, where rows of gold-trimmed chairs were still being arranged for one of the most important business meetings Rove Harlan Group had ever hosted. The number looked small to the young technician standing beside the projector. To anyone else, it was just another financial line in a presentation. But to Marin Vale Rove, it was a loaded gun pointed at her husband's future. Marin Vale Rove, 35, was Callan Rove's quiet wife, a woman his family treated like a simple housewife who knew more about folded napkins than finance. She stood near the front row in a plain grey dress, small pearl earrings, and soft low heels, holding Callan's forgotten leather folder tight against her chest. Nothing about her looked powerful. Nothing about her looked rich. Nothing about her told the room that the company whose name covered every sealed folder on the tables secretly belonged to her. The logo on the screen read Vera Stone Dominion. Callan thought Vera Stone was only the company his family was trying to impress. He did not know Marin owned it through the private trust her father had built before he died. And now, his presentation had a mistake that could make him look dishonest. Marin moved closer to the screen. Staff members were still setting water glasses and testing microphones. Two junior Vera Stone employees whispered near the back wall, checking name cards for the executives who would arrive later. Nobody was paying serious attention to her. To them, she was only the wife of the man presenting that morning. "Excuse me," Marin said softly to the technician, a young man with a headset around his neck. "Can you pause on slide 12? The technician blinked at her. "Ma'am." "Slide 12, she repeated, still gentle. "The debt coverage ratio is wrong. If that number stays there, Vera Stone's analysts will ask for the raw file before your team finishes the opening statement." The technician looked at the screen, then looked at her again. He did not know whether to obey her. Before he could answer, Lena Mott, 42, the event coordinator hired to manage the pre-signing presentation, walked over with a clipboard in her hand. Lena was a sharp-eyed woman who had worked high-level corporate events for years, and she had already noticed that Marin was watching the room like someone who understood more than seating charts. "What is the problem?" Lena asked. Marin pointed to the number. "That figure should be 3.8, not 5.3. If Callan presents it this way, it will look like Rove Harlan is hiding pressure from its lenders." Lena's expression changed. "How do you know Vera Stone's review model that well?" Marin gave a small smile. "I listen more than people think." It was a simple answer, but it was not the full truth. The full truth was hidden inside her name, inside a trust, inside years of silence. The technician corrected the slide. Marin checked the next 2 pages quickly, then closed the folder in her hands. She should have let Callan carry the mistake. After the way he had spoken to her that morning, maybe another woman would have, but Marin was still his wife. She had loved him through failed meetings, sleepless nights, and the heavy shadow of his father's expectations. She still wanted him to win. That was what made the pain so dangerous. For a moment, the bright conference room faded, and Marin saw another room from many years ago. Her father, Ammon Vale, 67 at the time, founder of Vera Stone Dominion and the only parent who had truly protected her, sat behind a dark wooden desk with sunlight falling across his silver hair. He had told her that money made people perform. Humility made them reveal themselves. "Hide the crown until you know who loves the head beneath it," he had said. After relatives betrayed Marin's mother over inheritance, Ammon placed Marin's ownership inside the Vale Anchor Trust. Public records would show the trust and the board. They would not show Marin's face. Only a few people knew she controlled Vera Stone. It was not because she was ashamed of power. It was because she wanted to know who would respect her when they thought she had none. That was why Callan did not know. Callan Rove, 38, was Marin's husband and the rising executive face of Rove Harlan Group, his family's proud but secretly struggling company. He entered the room in a tailored navy suit, his jaw tight, his phone in one hand, impatience already written across his face. "Marin," he said, walking toward her, "why are you standing near the screen?" He handed him the leather folder. "You forgot this in the car. I also noticed one number on slide 12 was wrong, so I asked them to correct it before the analysts arrived." Callan's eyes moved quickly to Lena, then to the technician, then back to Marin. Embarrassment flashed across his face, but not gratitude. "You corrected my slide?" he asked under his breath. "It would have raised questions," Marin said. "I only wanted to help." His mouth tightened. "Marin, this is not grocery budgeting. This is a $10 billion room." The words landed quietly, but they cut deep. Lena looked down at her clipboard, pretending not to hear. The technician turned back to the laptop. A junior employee near the back stopped whispering. The insult had not been loud, but it had been clear enough. Marin did not defend herself. She only nodded once. Callan took the folder from her, already looking past her toward the double doors. He did not ask how she knew the number was wrong. He did not wonder why the event coordinator looked at her with sudden respect. He only saw a wife who, in his mind, had stepped too close to a world too large for her. Then the room changed. The private elevator opened at the far end of the hall, and several staff members straightened at once. Osric Hale, 59, the chairman of Vera Stone Dominion and Marin's most trusted corporate ally, stepped out with 2 executives behind him. He was tall, composed, and feared in boardrooms because he did not waste words. To Callan, Osric was the gatekeeper to the $10 billion deal. To Marin, he was the man her father had trusted to protect her name until she was ready to use it. Callan immediately adjusted his jacket and lifted his chin. "Mr. Hale," he said, moving forward with a polished smile, but Osric's eyes did not go to Callan first. They went to Marin. It was only a small nod, almost invisible. Respectful, controlled, and brief. Callan missed it because he was too busy preparing to be important. Marin did not miss it. For one silent second, the truth stood in the room with all of them. The wife Callan had just insulted was the reason this meeting existed. The woman he thought could not understand a $10 billion room was the hidden owner of the company everyone feared. Osric shook Callan's hand and spoke formally, as if Marin were no one special. That was how it had to be. The trust, the board, the secrecy, all of it depended on discipline. Still, as Callan turned to review his opening remarks, Osric passed close to Marin near the side aisle. Without looking directly at her, he slipped a folded guest card into her hand. His voice was low enough that only she could hear. "Madam Vale, there is a name on tonight's private reception list you should see." Marin's fingers tightened around the card. She waited until Osric moved away before opening it. One name sat printed in black ink. Brielle Say. Marin's breath slowed. She had seen that name before, glowing on Callan's phone after midnight. And before the first meeting of the day had even begun, the room suddenly felt colder than it should have. The message appeared before Marin could look away. Callan's phone sat face up on a cream leather chair inside the private executive lounge, glowing like it had been waiting for her. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of staff preparing the conference hall. Marin had only stepped in to place Callan's corrected folder on the table before the presentation began, but now her eyes were fixed on the bright screen. The sender's name was Brielle. The message preview read, "Your mother moved my seat beside you for tonight. Wear the blue tie. It matches the bracelet you bought me." For a second, Marin forgot how to breathe. She did not touch the phone. She did not pick it up. She did not need to. The words were already enough. Brielle was not just a name on a guest card. She was not just a business contact. She was not some harmless consultant helping the Rove family look polished for Vera Stone Dominion. She was close enough to Callan to know what tie he would wear, close enough to receive jewelry from him, close enough for his mother to move seats around for her. Marin stood still with Callan's folder pressed to her chest, the same folder she had just protected from a mistake that could have ruined him in front of Vera Stone's analysts. The cruelty of it almost made her laugh. She had saved him from embarrassment that morning, while he was preparing to embarrass her by evening. A memory rose before she could stop it. 2 months earlier, Callan had come home after midnight with his jacket smelling of soft perfume that was not hers. Marin had been sitting alone at the dining table, dinner cold beside her hand. When she asked where he had been, he said, "Business optics, Marin. Brielle understands the kind of image this family needs before the deal." She had asked if Brielle was important. Callan had smiled in that tired, dismissive way he used whenever he wanted her to feel small. "She is a branding consultant. Do not turn everything into a wife problem." Now the words on his phone connected every loose thread. The late nights, the perfume, the sudden care about his clothes, the way his mother had stopped inviting Marin into planning conversations, the way Callan had begun saying, "my future," instead of "our future." Marin placed the folder on the executive table, then stepped back from the phone like it had burned her. The lounge door opened. Sheila Rove, 61, Callan's elegant mother and Marin's mother-in-law, entered carrying a stack of seating cards in one hand. She wore a pale silk suit, her silver hair pinned perfectly, her face calm with the cold confidence of a woman who had spent years hurting people without raising her voice. She stopped when she saw Marin standing near the chair. Then her eyes dropped to Callan's phone. Sheila understood immediately. She did not look ashamed. She smiled. "A man about to enter a $10 billion future," Sheila said softly, "needs a woman beside him who looks like that future." Marin's throat tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "Is Brielle here as a consultant or as something else?" Sheila set the seating cards on the table and slowly adjusted one with her fingertip, as if Marin's pain were only a small decoration placed wrong. "Brielle understands power," she said. "She understands rooms like this. She understands presentation, influence, attention." Marin looked at her. "And what do I understand?" Sheila's smile grew thinner. "You understand devotion, that has its place, but Callan needs support that does not look homemade." The insult was quiet, but it landed hard. Marin did not answer. She had learned long ago that people like Sheila did not speak to understand. They spoke to reduce. Before Marin could leave, voices drifted from the half-open door of the smaller side office beside the lounge. Torin Rove, 65, Callan's father and the controlling patriarch of Rove Harlan Group, stood inside with Dax Monroe, 48, the company's chief financial officer and Torin's most trusted numbers man. Torin had a heavy voice, expensive taste, and the tired pride of a man who would rather lie than admit weakness. Dax sounded nervous. "If Vera Stone asks for deeper disclosure before the final contract, the bridge loans will show," Dax said. "So will the delayed vendor payments. We can explain some of it, but not all." Torin cut him off. "The deal must close first. After the first funding release, nobody will care how tight the last quarter looked." "That is a risk," Dax said. "No," Torin replied. The risk is looking weak before we get the money. Maren's heart shifted. This was no longer only about a mistress. This was about hidden debt, misleading numbers, a family trying to look powerful while quietly reaching for Vera Stone's money like a lifeline, and Vera Stone was hers. Maren walked out of the lounge before Seela could see her face change. In the hallway, she moved behind a tall marble column where the staff noise covered her voice. She took out her private phone and called Kara Von, 40, Maren's corporate attorney and one of the few people who knew she controlled Vera Stone through the Vale Anchor Trust. Kara answered on the second ring. "Maren, I need a quiet review," Maren said. "All Rove Harlan consultant payments, branding expenses, executive gifts, luxury reimbursements, and personal event spending connected to Brielle say." There was a pause. "Is this personal or corporate?" Kara asked. Maren looked through the glass wall at Callan's phone still glowing in the lounge. It became corporate the moment they used company money to hide it. Kara's voice sharpened. "I will start clean, no noise, no warning." "Good," Maren said. "And Kara, yes, do not let them know I asked." After the call ended, Maren stood in silence for a moment. She thought about the younger Callan she had once loved, the man who had sat on the floor of their first apartment with his head in his hands after Torin called him weak. Back then, Callan had been terrified of failing his family. Maren had stayed awake all night beside him, rewriting his failed pitch deck line by line. She made the numbers clearer. She softened his opening. She gave him the one sentence that later won his father's praise. The next day, Torin had clapped Callan on the back and called him a rove at last. Callan never told anyone Maren helped. She had not minded then. Love did not always need credit. But now, watching him build a future beside another woman, Maren felt the old sacrifice turn heavy inside her. The private elevator chimed. Every head near the hallway turned. Brielle Say, 33, Callan's mistress and a polished branding consultant tied to the Rove family's public image campaign, stepped out as if she had been invited to own the air. She wore a white designer suit, glossy heels, and a diamond bracelet that flashed under the ceiling lights, the bracelet from the message. Callan came out of the presentation room at that exact moment. His face changed when he saw her. It softened, it brightened, it became alive in a way Maren had not seen directed at her in months. Brielle crossed the floor and embraced Seela like family. Seela held her warmly. Maren watched from behind the glass wall, unseen by the people who thought she knew nothing. Then Brielle turned and walked toward the corridor. She passed Maren, paused, and gave her a sweet smile that carried no kindness. "You must be Maren," Brielle said. "Seela told me you were very devoted." Her eyes lowered slowly to Maren's plain shoes. "Now I understand." Maren said nothing, but somewhere behind the quiet in her face, the first page of the final contract had already begun to change. Maren's chair was gone, not missing by mistake, not moved by a careless staff member, gone from the place where a wife's seat should have been beside her husband, under the warm chandelier lights of the private pre-signing reception. For one sharp second, Maren stood at the entrance of the hall and looked at the long, polished table. Every name card had been placed with perfect care. Crystal glasses shone beside folded napkins. Gold plates sat under soft lights. At the front of the room, behind a heavy curtain, the Vera Stone Dominion logo waited to be revealed later in the evening. This room had been designed to make the Rove family look powerful, and Maren had been placed near the service entrance. Her name card sat at the far end of the table, beside the door where servers came in and out with trays. Her chair was not near Callan. It was not even near his parents. It was close enough for everyone to see she had been pushed aside, but far enough to remind her that she was not wanted beside the future they were celebrating. In her rightful seat sat Brielle. Brielle leaned beside Callan with the calm confidence of a woman who had been told she belonged there. Her white designer suit looked perfect under the lights. The diamond bracelet Callan bought her flashed every time she lifted her hand. She was not hiding anymore. Neither was the Rove family. Lena saw the seating change before anyone spoke. She moved quickly toward Maren and lowered her voice. "Mrs. Rove, I can fix this. I know where your seat was approved to be on the original chart." Maren looked at the table. Then she looked at Seela, who stood near the floral arrangement with a small, satisfied smile. "No," Maren said quietly. "Leave it." Lena frowned with concern. "Are you sure?" Maren nodded. "I want to see what they do when they think I have no power." Lena stepped back, but pain crossed her face. She had managed many cruel rooms in her career, but this one felt different. This was not just seating, it was a public message. Marin walked forward slowly. Callan noticed her, but he did not stand. He did not move the chair. He did not call her over. Instead, he rested one hand near Brielle's chair, as if that chair now belonged to the woman beside him. Brielle smiled softly, her eyes bright with victory. "Marin," Callan said loud enough for the guests nearest them to hear, "there is no shame in being a poor housewife. Every empire needs someone to make sure the table is set." The room went quiet, not fully silent at first, just quiet enough for the insult to spread. Marin felt the words hit her before she allowed her face to react. Poor housewife, not from Brielle, from her husband, the man whose presentation she had saved that morning, the man whose folder she had carried. The man whose future she had protected before Vera Stone's analysts could question him. Brielle lowered her eyes with a sweet smile, pretending modesty while sitting in Marin's chair. The diamond bracelet on her wrist caught the chandelier light again, flashing like a reward for cruelty. A few people gave soft laughs, not loud, but enough. Callan lifted his glass and gave a relaxed smile, the kind he used when he wanted a room to believe everything was under control. "Marin has a good heart," he added. "She is happiest when things are simple." There it was again, simple. He used the word like a pretty cloth thrown over insult. Simple wife, simple mind, simple place, simple life. Marin held his gaze for a moment, waiting for shame to appear in his eyes. It did not. Seela stepped closer, her pale silk suit glowing beneath the chandelier lights. Her smile was calm, polished, and cold. "Callan is right," Seela said softly, turning just enough for the guests to hear. "Marin has always been devoted, but devotion has its proper place. A woman like her belongs at home, not beside a $10 billion future." The words were smooth enough to sound elegant. That made them worse. Several guests looked down. Some smiled because they wanted to stay close to power. Others pretended not to understand. Marin understood perfectly. Torin rose from his chair at the head of the table and tapped his glass with a silver knife. The soft sound pulled every face toward him. Conversations died. Phones lowered. Glasses lifted. "My friends," Torin began, his voice full of pride, "tonight is not the signing, but it is the beginning of what that signing will mean. Rove Harlan Group is stepping into a future most families only dream about. A $10 billion partnership does not come to weak people. It comes to legacy." He paused and looked at Callan with approval. Marin remembered how badly Callan had once wanted that look. Years ago, before the tailored suits and polished speeches, Callan had come home broken after lenders rejected his first expansion pitch. He had sat on the floor of their small bedroom, tie loose, eyes red with anger and shame. Torin had called him weak that day. Marin had sat beside Callan until midnight, then until morning, helping him rebuild every page of that failed proposal. She had called an old contact from her father's private network and quietly arranged a second meeting for him. She never told him who opened that door. She let him believe his own courage had done it. When Torin praised him later, Marin stood in the background and smiled because love at that time did not need credit. Now that same pride stood across the table, sharpened into cruelty. Torin lifted his glass higher and looked toward Marin with a small, dismissive smile. "Every powerful family needs someone humble enough to keep the house warm," he said, "while real leaders build the empire." Seela laughed softly. Brielle smiled wider. Callan did not stop them. That was the moment Marin understood the full shape of it. This was not only her husband failing to defend her. This was her husband leading the humiliation, his parents completing it, and his mistress enjoying it from the chair that should have been hers. The room knew it too. They knew Callan had chosen Brielle publicly. They knew Seela had blessed it. They knew Torin had turned Marin into a symbol of everything the family wanted to leave behind. And still, nobody spoke for her. Brielle lifted her wrist again, letting the bracelet catch the light. "Callan has worked so hard for this room," she said sweetly. "It is only fair that he stands beside someone who understands what it means." Marin's fingers tightened around the stem of her untouched glass. She looked at Callan. This was his last chance. One word from him could have stopped it. One simple sentence could have protected her. One moment of courage could have reminded everyone that she was his wife, not their entertainment. Callan sighed as if she were the problem. "You were never built for rooms like this, Marin," he said. "You would not understand what this deal means." The deepest silence followed that line, not because the room was shocked, because everyone now knew he had chosen. Brielle's smile widened. Seela looked pleased. Torin sat back with satisfaction. Dax stared into his glass, his jaw tight, saying nothing. His silence told Marin he knew things were wrong, but he preferred survival over truth. Near the curtained stage, Osric watched with a face so controlled it looked carved from stone. His eyes moved from Callan to Seela, then to Torin, then to Brielle's bracelet. He had seen enough to understand the character of the people asking Vera Stone for billions. He took one slow step forward. Maren saw it. She gave him the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. She did not want rescue, not in that room, not from him, not before the people at the table finished revealing exactly who they were. Seela turned toward Maren again and smiled with fake softness. "Dear, since you are already near the service door, could you help the staff bring extra water? At least you are useful with practical things." That final insult landed in front of everyone. Maren placed her glass down carefully. Her hand did not shake now. She turned toward the service entrance, not because Seela commanded her, but because walking away was the only way to keep from giving them the reaction they wanted. At the side console, Callan's leather folder sat where he had dropped it after the presentation, ignored again now that Brielle held his attention. Maren picked it up quietly. If he could abandon even the work she had protected, she would carry it away as proof of what he never valued. Then her phone vibrated inside her small black purse. She opened the message. It was from Keira. Preliminary ledger search found payments to Brielle hidden under corporate consulting. This is bigger than an affair. Maren stared at the words. The chandelier lights blurred for 1 second, then sharpened again. Across the room, Callan laughed softly at something Brielle whispered in his ear. Maren lowered the phone, lifted her face, and looked once more at the family that thought they had just reduced her to nothing. They did not know the room had changed. They only knew she was silent. The door closed behind Maren, and the laughter inside the reception hall became a muffled sound of betrayal. For a moment, she could not move. The golden hallway outside the ballroom stretched in front of her, bright and polished, but all she could feel was the heat in her chest and the cold shake in her fingers. Inside that room, her husband had smiled while another woman sat in her chair. His parents had called her small without using the word small. Brielle had smiled while Callan mocked her as a poor housewife in front of guests who were too afraid of the Rove name to defend her. Maren had walked out with her head high, but the second the door shut, her hand trembled. She pressed her palm against the wall, not because she was weak, but because pain had weight. It did not always come as tears. Sometimes it came as silence so heavy the body needed something solid to hold. Behind the closed doors, glasses clinked again. Someone laughed. The music continued. Life had not stopped for them, but something inside Maren had. She looked down and realized she was still holding Callan's leather folder, the same folder she had carried into the conference center before sunrise, the same folder she had protected when his presentation had almost exposed a dangerous mistake, the same folder Callan had ignored once the room began treating Brielle like the woman beside his future. Slowly, she opened it. The first page was his speech. The second page was his corrected financial slide. Behind that, tucked carefully into the inside pocket, was the small handwritten note she had written before the day began. "Lead with honor, I believe in you." The note was still folded. Callan had never opened it. That broke her more than the laughter. Maren stared at the folded paper as her vision blurred. The insults had hurt, but this hurt deeper. It meant he had not even noticed the love she gave quietly. He had carried her encouragement into the room and never cared enough to read it. She remembered writing that note in the back of the car while Callan complained about traffic and told her not to speak too much at the reception. She had folded it carefully, thinking maybe he would find it before his presentation. Maybe it would calm him. Maybe it would remind him that, even after months of distance, she was still standing with him. But he had stood with Brielle. The hallway blurred, and a memory pulled Maren backward. Years earlier, Callan had been younger, frightened, and desperate to prove himself. Torin had called him weak after a failed lender meeting. Callan had come home that night with his tie hanging loose and his pride broken. He had sat on the floor of their small bedroom, whispering that his father would never respect him. Maren had sat beside him. She had taken his failed pitch deck, stayed awake until dawn, and rebuilt it page by page. She had softened the opening, corrected the numbers, and called one of her father's old contacts to make sure Callan got a second chance. The next week, Torin praised Callan for being brilliant. Callan never knew Maren had opened that door. She had not needed credit then. But now, standing alone in the hallway with the unopened note in her hand, Maren realized something painful. Love without credit was one thing. Love treated like weakness was another. A soft footstep approached. Lena stood a few feet away, holding a small stack of unused place cards. Her face carried the quiet anger of someone who had watched cruelty happen and hated that she could not stop it sooner. "Mrs. Rove," Lena said gently, "nobody in that room had the right to do that." Maren folded the note again, slower this time. They treated me according to what they thought I had. Lena's eyes softened. They were wrong. Maren gave a small, sad smile. Not to themselves. Before Lena could answer, the ballroom door opened. Callan stepped into the hallway. For half a second, Maren's heart betrayed her. It hoped. Even after everything, some soft part of her wanted him to look ashamed, wanted him to say he had gone too far, wanted him to remember she was his wife before she was anyone's target. But Callan's face held no regret, only irritation. "What are you doing out here?" he asked in a low voice. "Do you understand how that looked?" Maren stared at him. "How what looked?" "You walking out," he said, "leaving the table like that, making everyone wonder if there is some problem between us." A strange calm settled over her. "There is a problem between us, Callan." His jaw tightened. "Do not do this tonight. This night is important." "I know," Maren said. "That is why I helped you prepare for it." He glanced at the folder in her hand, then away, as if the truth made him uncomfortable. "You embarrassed me," he said. Maren's voice stayed quiet. "Did I embarrass you, or did I stop standing still while you did?" The question hung between them. Then Brielle appeared behind him. She had followed close enough to hear, and the bracelet on her wrist flashed under the hallway light like a cruel reminder. She did not look surprised. She looked entertained. "Tonight is about Callan's future, Maren," Brielle said sweetly, "not your insecurity." Maren looked from Brielle to Callan. He did not correct her. Instead, Callan stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Go home, calm down, and please stop acting like you understand rooms you were never meant to enter." There it was, not just betrayal, erasure. He was not sorry he had hurt her. He was sorry she had stopped making the hurt convenient for him. Maren closed the folder. For the first time all night, she felt the wife inside her step back, and the owner inside her stand still. She looked at Callan and said, "I hope the room you chose can protect you from the truth." Callan frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Maren did not answer. She walked away. The private elevator at the end of the hall opened for her before anyone else could follow. The doors closed around her, cutting off the sound of Brielle's soft laugh and Callan's angry breath. Inside the elevator, Maren took out her private phone. She called Kara first, then Osric. Her voice was calm when they answered, but it was no longer the voice of a wounded wife asking to be understood. It was the voice of the woman who controlled the final signature. "Begin an owner-level review of Rove Harlan," Maren said. "I want every financial document, every debt disclosure, every side agreement, every consultant payment, every luxury expense, and every file connected to Brielle." Say. Kara did not waste time. "Do you want to cancel the deal?" "No." Osric's voice came through next, careful and controlled. "Do you want them told who you are?" Maren looked down at the folded note still in her hand. Her father's voice came back to her from years ago. "Never punish someone because your heart is hurt. Wait until their choices create evidence strong enough to stand without tears." Maren inhaled slowly. "Not yet," she said. "Let Callan keep thinking I am small. People speak freely when they believe power is not listening." Elevator reached the ground floor. Maren stepped out into the quiet lobby, where the marble floors reflected the lights above like still water. Her phone vibrated again before she reached the exit. It was Kara calling back. Maren answered. Kara's voice had changed. "Maren, one more thing. Brielle signed a private memo suggesting she will hold authority after the Vera Stone deal closes." Maren stopped walking. The night beyond the glass doors looked dark and endless. "Send me everything," she said. And somewhere above her, in the bright ballroom, the people still laughing had no idea their own paperwork had just begun to turn against them. The first invoice made Maren's heart turn cold. It sat on the glass table inside Vera Stone Dominion's private legal office, printed in black and white, clean enough to look harmless. But the words on it were not harmless. They were a map of betrayal. Executive presentation accessories, $48,700. Kara placed one finger on the line item and slid the paper toward Maren. "That," Kara said, "is the bracelet." Maren did not speak at first. The diamond bracelet Brielle had lifted under the chandelier lights, the same bracelet Callan had bought for her, the same bracelet Brielle had displayed while Maren was mocked as a poor housewife, had not been paid for with Callan's personal money. It had been buried inside Rove Harlan Group's corporate expenses. Maren sat very still in the private office. The windows behind her showed the dark city below, but she barely saw it. Her wedding ring rested beside a stack of printed documents. She had not thrown it. She had not crushed it. She had placed it down gently, as if even after everything, some part of her still respected what the ring used to mean. But her eyes were no longer soft. Osric stood near the end of the table, arms folded, watching Marin carefully. He knew she was hurt, but he also knew better than to mistake her quietness for confusion. Kara opened another file. Brielle's hotel stays were labeled as brand strategy sessions, she said. Private dinners with Callan were filed as investor confidence development. Her car service was listed as executive image transport. And this payment here, she turned another page, $275,000 to Say Image House. Marin looked at the name. Say Image House was Brielle's image consulting company, the polished little business she used to enter powerful rooms and pretend she belonged in them. Kara continued. The description says pre-deal reputation alignment. But there is no report, no campaign file, no deliverable, no actual work product, just payment approvals routed through Callan's office and signed off as deal preparation. Marin's fingers touched the edge of the paper, but she did not pick it up. So it was not only an affair, she said. No, Kara answered. It was corporate money used to dress up an affair. The room went silent. That silence was different from the silence in the reception hall. Their silence had been forced on Marin by humiliation. Here, silence belonged to her. It gathered around her like power waiting to be used. Osric placed a second folder on the table. There is more, he said. Marin looked up. Rove Harlan is weaker than they presented, Osric said. Their vendor payments are delayed. Several loans have been extended twice. They used the expected Vera Stone deal to calm creditors. Without our first funding release, they may not survive the next quarter. The irony landed slowly. The family that had called her poor was secretly begging for her money. The people who said she did not understand a $10 billion room were hiding debts from the company she owned. The husband who told her she was not built for business had used business accounts to buy diamonds for the woman sitting in her chair. Marin closed her eyes for a moment, not because she was weak, because if she kept looking at the papers, the pain might turn too quickly into anger. And anger, her father once told her, was dangerous when it arrived before the truth was complete. The memory came softly. Years earlier, Marin had stood with her father outside a shuttered factory he had purchased after another company collapsed. Workers stood near the gate holding boxes filled with uniforms, lunch bags, and framed family photos. They had not stolen anything. They had not lied to lenders. They had not bought bracelets with company money. But they were the ones who lost their jobs because executives had hidden the truth. Ammon had pointed to the workers and said, "Ownership is not a crown, Marin. It is a responsibility. If you punish the guilty, protect the innocent." That lesson returned now with painful clarity. Marin opened her eyes. "Do we know who helped them hide the numbers?" she asked. Kara turned another page. Dax Monroe sent incomplete reports to our review team. He left out the delayed vendor balances and softened the loan language. He knows the real pressure, Osric added. Torin likely promised him a bonus after closing. Marin looked toward the dark window. "Do not attack Dax yet," she said. "Watch him. Nervous men often become useful witnesses when the room starts shrinking." Kara nodded. "Understood." The scene shifted from the quiet legal office to the Rove family mansion, where the lights were still bright and the champagne was still flowing. Callan stood near the marble bar with Brielle beside him. Sela sat on a cream sofa, smiling like a queen who believed the throne had already been secured. Torin poured himself another drink, speaking loudly about how Vera Stone would soon make their family untouchable. Brielle lifted her wrist and laughed as the bracelet flashed again. "You should have seen Marin's face," she said. "She just stood there like she wanted the floor to swallow her." Sela smiled. "Marin survives by being invisible. That is why she has lasted this long." Torin gave a cold chuckle. "After the deal closes, Callan can clean up his personal life." Nobody said divorce. Nobody needed to. Callan looked into his glass and did not defend his wife. He only said, "One thing at a time, first the deal, then everything else." Back in the legal office, Kara spread a clean draft template across the table. "What do you want the final contract to do?" she asked. Marin looked at the ring beside the documents. For a second, the woman who once wrote notes in Callan's folder was still there. Then she looked at the invoices again, and the owner took over. "I want a full forensic audit before any funding is released," she said. "Disclosure of every consultant payment, repayment of misused corporate funds, removal of any executive who submitted false documents, personal guarantees from Callan and Torin, protection for ordinary employees, and final approval from the true owner." Kara began writing. Osric watched Marin with quiet respect. Before dawn, Kara's computer chimed. A new file had arrived from the preliminary search. She opened it, read the first lines, and her expression hardened. "Marin," she said carefully, "you need to see this." She turned the screen. It was a private memo from Brielle to Callan. Once Vera Stone releases the first funding tranche, Maren must be removed from the family image immediately. Your mother agrees. Maren read it once, then again. The room became so quiet that even the hum of the lights seemed loud. Finally, Maren lifted her eyes to Kara. Add one more clause, she said, and before sunrise touched the windows, the contract that the Rove family was waiting to celebrate had quietly become the weapon they would never see coming. Continuing from the uploaded script, here are the corrected scenes 6-10 with minimum necessary changes, tighter logic, and a stronger realistic payoff. The first anonymous warning came at 2:17 in the morning. Kara Von's secure phone lit up on the table beside a stack of Rove Harlan bank records, and the message on the screen was short enough to look harmless. If Torin finds out I am talking, I am finished. But Vera Stone is asking the right questions. Someone knows. Kara stared at the message for 3 seconds before forwarding it to Maren. Crosstown, Maren Vale Rove sat alone in a quiet reading room, wrapped in a soft dark robe, her wedding ring resting inside a small glass dish beside her chair. The house was silent. Callan Rove had not come home again. He had sent no apology, no explanation, only cold messages that sounded more like instructions than words from a husband. She opened Kara's forwarded message and read it twice. Then she looked at the ring. The days after the humiliation had not broken loudly. They had broken slowly, one quiet hour at a time. Maren had stopped attending Rove family dinners. She stopped asking Callan where he was going. She stopped waiting near the door when his car pulled into the driveway after midnight. She did not post anything online. She did not call Brielle. She did not confront Seela. She did not beg Callan to choose her. She disappeared from their noise. And because the Rove family had never understood quiet strength, they decided she must be defeated. Callan believed it most of all. His messages came every few days, short and cold. When are you going to act normal again? The family is under pressure. Do not make this harder. After the deal closes, we can discuss whatever mood you are in. Not once did he say he was sorry. Not once did he ask if she was hurt. To Callan, Maren's silence was only a delay before obedience. He thought she was waiting for him to forgive her for leaving the reception, as if she had been the one who betrayed the marriage in front of witnesses. While he waited for her to become small again, Brielle grew larger in public. She began appearing beside Callan at business breakfasts, charity previews, and investor dinners. She never posted his face clearly, but she posted enough. His watch near her glass, his hand at the edge of a table, Seela's pearl bracelet beside her designer clutch, a caption that said, "Standing beside greatness takes courage." She never wrote Maren's name. She did not need to. Everyone who knew the Rove family understood what she was trying to say. Seela encouraged it. She wanted people to get used to seeing Brielle where Maren had once stood. She wanted society to accept the replacement before the final Vera Stone contract made the family powerful enough to stop pretending. Torin did not care about the romance. He cared about the picture. Callan looked sharper beside Brielle, more ambitious, more expensive, more like the son Torin wanted to sell to the world. But beneath their celebration, the ground was moving. Kara's team interviewed vendors who had waited months for payment, while Rove Harlan spent money on image events. They reviewed bank transfers, consultant invoices, travel receipts, luxury gifts, and every file Rove Harlan had submitted to Vera Stone. Osric ordered deeper due diligence under the clean language of normal risk management for a $10 billion deal. Nothing looked emotional. Everything looked procedural. That was what made it dangerous. The questions arrived at Rove Harlan slowly at first, then faster. A request for loan schedules, a request for vendor agging reports, a request for all consultant agreements connected to pre-deal branding, a request for full disclosure of payments to say Image House. Dax began to panic. He knew the questions were too exact. Vera Stone was not simply reviewing numbers. Someone had pointed them toward the weak places, and weak places were everywhere. When Kara showed Maren the first anonymous message, Maren did not smile. She sat quietly with her hands folded and looked at the words like a woman listening to a locked door begin to crack. Kara called her moments later. "It is likely Dax," Kara said. "The wording matches someone inside finance. He is scared." "Good," Maren said. "Do you want me to pressure him?" "No," Maren answered. "Offer him protection if he tells the truth. No protection if he hides it." Kara paused. "You are giving him a chance." "I am giving the truth a way out," Maren said. "If he refuses it, then he chooses where he stands." That was Maren's line now, not cruelty, not mercy without wisdom, just a clear door between truth and consequence. After the call, she sat in silence and remembered another glass room from years earlier. She had been 26, only weeks after her father died, sitting behind the tinted wall of Vera Stone's main boardroom. Men twice her age had spoken about her, as if she were a child who had inherited something too large for her hands. One of them had said she would probably let Osric handle everything while she enjoyed the money. Maren had almost walked in to correct him, but her father's old attorney had stopped her gently and said, "Let them talk. The person who controls the final signature does not need to interrupt." That lesson had become part of her bones. Years later, she used that same patience on Callan. One evening, he finally came home before midnight. Maren sat in the reading room with a book open on her lap, though she had not read a full page in an hour. Callan stood in the doorway, loosening his tie, looking at her with mild annoyance. "You have been quiet for weeks," he said. Maren turned a page. "Have I?" He frowned. "Do not do that, this distant act. It is exhausting." She looked up then. Callan stepped farther into the room. "Brielle will be at more events. Investors respond well to her energy. My mother thinks it is necessary until the deal closes." Maren watched him carefully. He said it like he was explaining weather, like bringing his mistress into public was not a wound, but a business adjustment. "Then take who you believe belongs beside you," she said. Callan blinked, almost surprised by how easily she gave the words. "I am glad you are finally being reasonable," he said. Maren looked back at her book. He thought he had won. He did not know Kara had already seen the invoices. He did not know Osric had ordered deeper review. He did not know Dax was shaking behind anonymous messages. He did not know Brielle's name was no longer just attached to an affair, but to a paper trail. That night after Callan left the room, Maren opened her secure tablet. A new file had arrived from Kara. The title alone made the air change. Post-funding image restructure. Maren opened it. The first recommendation read, "Remove Maren Rove from all public-facing family materials after Vera Stone approval." She sat still for a long moment. Then she closed the file. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the calm of a final decision. Now we let them celebrate. And somewhere in the dark machinery of the deal, the trap tightened without making a sound. The champagne tower was already built before the revised contract arrived. That was the first sign that the Rove family believed victory belonged to them before anyone had placed a signature on paper. Crystal glasses rose in shining rows near the center of the private event hall. Gold lights washed over the walls. Photographers moved quietly between polished guests, catching smiles, handshakes, and expensive watches. Every table carried white roses and silver name cards. At the front of the room, a large covered screen waited to display the announcement everyone believed was coming. Rove Harlan Group and Vera Stone Dominion. A $10 billion future. A family saved, a legacy secured. At least that was the story Torin wanted everyone to believe. Maren entered through the side doors in a plain black dress, exactly as Callan had told her to dress. Simple, quiet, nothing bright, nothing that could pull attention. He had sent the message that afternoon like an instruction to a staff member, not a request to his wife. "Wear something simple tonight. Do not draw attention. We need stability until the deal closes." Maren had read the message twice, then placed the phone down without replying. Now she stood inside the celebration hall, calm and almost invisible, watching the people who thought they were controlling her. She did not come because Callan deserved her presence. She came because the final act needed witnesses. Callan saw her near the entrance and gave a short nod, as if he approved of how small she looked. He was wearing the blue tie again, the same tie Brielle had told him to wear in her message weeks earlier. Maren noticed. She always noticed. Brielle arrived moments later, and the room seemed to turn toward her. She wore a sparkling designer gown that caught every light in the hall. Her hair fell in soft waves, her makeup was perfect, and the diamond bracelet still circled her wrist like a trophy. She did not walk beside Callan at first. She waited until enough people were looking, then crossed the room and placed herself near him with practiced ease. Callan did not move away. Sela noticed and smiled. She walked over to a group of guests and placed one hand proudly on Brielle's arm. "This is the woman who helped Callan step into his future," she said warmly. Maren stood close enough to hear every word. The phrase was cruel because it sounded polished. It did not say mistress, it did not say replacement, it did not say betrayal, but everyone who had watched Brielle beside Callan these past weeks understood the message. Brielle lowered her eyes for a moment, pretending modesty. "I only helped bring out what was already there." Sela laughed softly. "That is what a suitable woman does." Marin looked away before anyone could read her face. Across the room, Dax stood near a high table with a glass of water he had not touched. His collar looked too tight. Sweat gathered at his temple even though the room was cool. He knew the final terms had not been accepted yet. He knew the documents he had sent to Kara could destroy Torin's version of the company. He also knew Torin would not forgive betrayal. But Dax had already chosen fear of the truth over loyalty to a lie. Torin moved to the center of the hall and lifted his glass. The guests quieted almost immediately. He loved that kind of silence, the kind powerful men mistook for respect. Tonight, Torin began, is a night my family has earned. Rovharlan Group was not built by weakness. It was built by discipline, sacrifice, and legacy. Vera Stone Dominion understands strength. That is why this partnership will change everything. The guests applauded. Callan smiled like the praise was already money in the bank. Marin watched him, and against her will, remembered their wedding day. He had stood before her in a dark suit, younger then, softer then, holding both her hands as if they were precious. He had whispered a promise only she could hear. I will never let my family make you feel small. Seela had sat in the front row that day with a beautiful smile that never reached her eyes. Even then, Marin had felt the coldness beneath the silk, but Callan had squeezed her hand, and she believed him. She believed love could outgrow family pride. She believed patience could soften cruelty. She believed a man who had once cried in her arms would never use her silence against her. Now he stood across the hall with Brielle at his side, letting his mother present another woman as his future. The memory faded. The woman standing there now was not the same bride who had believed every promise. Callan approached Marin after Torin's speech, his smile still fixed for the room. He took her lightly by the elbow and guided her toward a quiet corner near a floral display. To anyone watching, it might have looked tender. It was not. You are doing well tonight, he said. Marin looked at him. Am I? You are calm, he said. That is what we need right now. What you need, she corrected softly. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice smooth. After the deal closes, we need to redefine our marriage. Marin said nothing. Callan glanced toward Brielle, then back at Marin. You have been a good wife in private. I will never deny that. The words sounded almost kind, which made them worse. But my public future requires a different kind of woman, he continued. Someone who understands pressure, image, rooms like this. Marin looked directly at him. You mean Brielle? He did not deny it. She fits where I am going, he said. There was no anger in his voice, no shame, no apology. He said it calmly, like replacing his wife was a business decision, like she was an old chair being moved out before important guests arrived. For 1 second, Marin felt the old wound open again, not because she wanted him back, because she remembered when he had once needed her belief to stand upright. She nodded slowly. Then take who you believe belongs beside you. Callan exhaled, relieved. He mistook her peace for surrender. I am glad you understand, he said. Lena stood near the edge of the room with her clipboard pressed against her chest. She had seen the exchange. She had seen Callan's hand on Marin's elbow. She had seen Marin's face when he looked toward Brielle. Her eyes filled with quiet anger, but she stayed still. She had learned that some truths needed the right moment to be spoken. Marin's phone vibrated in her small black purse. She opened the message without changing expression. It was from Kara. Final contract delivered to Vera Stone board. Owner demands included. Marin read it once, then locked the screen. She did not smile. She looked across the hall at Callan lifting champagne beside Brielle. Seela stood near them like a proud mother presenting the bride she preferred. Torin laughed with guests, already acting like a man saved from drowning. Dax wiped his forehead again and looked toward the entrance as if expecting judgment to walk in wearing a suit. Then the main doors opened. Osric entered with Vera Stone's legal team behind him. Conversation faded. Step by step, he crossed the room carrying a sealed black folder. Torin's face brightened. Finally, he said, spreading his arms as if welcoming a crown. The contract. Osric stopped at the center table and placed the folder down. His voice was calm. The revised contract. The word moved through the room like a crack through glass. Dax nearly dropped his drink. And Marin, standing quietly near the flowers, knew the celebration had just reached its last safe second. Word revised killed the celebration before the music stopped. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The champagne tower still glittered under the gold lights. The photographers still held their cameras. The guests still stood around the room with smiles half frozen on their faces. But the air had changed. One word from Osric had turned victory into warning. Torin stared at the sealed black folder on the center table as if it had insulted him. Revised, he repeated. Osric did not blink. Yes. Callan quickly smiled, trying to rescue the mood. He placed a hand lightly on Brielle's back, as if touching her could remind everyone he was still confident. Revisions are normal at this level, he said. A deal this size always has final details. Seela lifted her chin and gave a soft laugh. Exactly. Great families do not fear paperwork. But Dax did. He stood near the side table with his glass trembling slightly in his hand. He'd seen enough Vera Stone requests over the past weeks to know this was not normal. A normal revision did not require Osric to enter with legal counsel. A normal revision did not arrive in a sealed folder while the room was full of witnesses. A normal revision did not make Kara stand so calmly beside the man who controlled access to the deal. Maren watched from near the flowers, quiet in her plain black dress. Callan had told her not to draw attention, so she did not yet. Osric opened the folder and removed a thick contract with colored tabs along the side. Then he nodded once to Kara. Kara stepped forward, carrying a clean copy of the first page. The room settled into an uneasy silence. The controlling owner of Vera Stone Dominion has reviewed Rove Harlan Group's final submission, Kara said. The owner is prepared to continue negotiations only if the following conditions are written into the final contract. Torin's smile stiffened. Conditions. Kara looked at him. Owner-level conditions. That phrase moved through the room like a cold hand. Maren lowered her eyes for a moment, and memory touched her quietly. She saw herself as a young woman sitting behind glass during her first board meeting after her father's death. Men had spoken over her name, around her future, and through her silence. Her father's attorney had whispered, "The person who controls the final signature does not need to interrupt." Now she stood in another room full of people who had mistaken silence for emptiness. Only this time, the silence had arrived with a contract. Kara began reading. First, before the first funding release, Rove Harlan Group must submit to a full forensic audit conducted by an independent firm approved by Vera Stone Dominion. Torin's face tightened. A forensic audit? That is excessive, Osric answered calmly. It is appropriate for the risk profile. The risk profile? Torin snapped. Kara continued before his anger could take over the room. Second, Rove Harlan must disclose every consultant payment, brand contract, luxury reimbursement, executive gift, private travel expense, and personal entertainment cost from the past 18 months. Brielle's smile faded. Her hand moved without thought to the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Maren saw it. So did Kara. So did Osric. Callan noticed too, and for the first time that night, his confidence slipped. Kara turned the page. Third, any executive who submitted incomplete, false, or misleading financial information to Vera Stone Dominion must be removed from deal authority before the partnership proceeds. Dax lowered his head. The room seemed to shrink around him. Torin looked toward him sharply, but Dax would not meet his eyes. That alone told a story. Some guests began whispering, soft and quick, the kind of whispers powerful people hate because they cannot control where they go next. Kara kept reading. Fourth, any misused corporate funds tied to personal relationships, private gifts, false consulting work, or non-business entertainment must be repaid before closing. Callan looked at Brielle. Brielle looked away. Seela's fingers tightened around her clutch. The bracelet that had sparkled like victory during Maren's humiliation now looked like evidence. Brielle slowly lowered her wrist, but it was too late. Everyone had already seen the movement. Everyone had already understood that the claws had touched her. Kara continued. Fifth, Torin Rove and Callan Rove must sign personal liability guarantees confirming that no hidden debt, delayed vendor obligations, or undisclosed creditor pressure was concealed from Vera Stone Dominion during negotiations. Torin slammed his glass down hard enough that several guests flinched. These demands are insulting, he said. Osric's voice stayed even. They are protective. Protective of what? Torin demanded. Of $10 billion, Osric said. And of every employee who would suffer if that money entered a company built on incomplete truth. The room went quiet again. That answer was too clean to challenge without looking guilty. Maren felt the weight of her father's lesson settle over her heart. Protect the innocent. Punish only what the truth can prove. She was not destroying Rove Harlan because Callan hurt her. She was protecting Vera Stone, its investment. And the ordinary workers Torin would gladly risk to save his name. Kara turned to the next page. Her voice slowed. Sixth, Final release of funds requires written approval from the true controlling owner of Vera Stone Dominion, who reserves the right to reject any executive connected to deception, reputational fraud, misuse of corporate funds, concealment of material financial risk, or conduct that damages Vera Stone's reputation before closing. This time, nobody whispered. The silence was complete. Callan stared at Osric. "Who is this owner?" Osric did not answer. That was what made the silence worse. Callan gave a short laugh, but it sounded forced. "We have dealt with your board, your chairman, your analysts, your legal team. Nobody mentioned some hidden owner making personal demands." Kara looked down at the contract again. "There is one more condition." Sela's face had gone pale, though she tried to hide it with a stiff smile. "Maury," Kara read from the page. "The owner also demands a formal written correction and apology for defamatory and degrading remarks made during the pre-signing reception by Callan Rove, Sela Rove, and Torin Rove against Maren Vale Rove, who was publicly mocked as a poor housewife in front of invited guests, while Brielle Say occupied Maren Rove's approved seat beside Callan Rove." The words landed like glass breaking. Sela stopped breathing for a second. Torin's hand tightened around his glass. Callan's face changed first with anger, then with fear. Brielle's eyes widened. "How would they know all that?" No one answered at first. Then Lena stepped forward from near the side of the room. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "Because it happened." Every eye turned to her. Lena held a folder close to her chest. "I submitted a written statement after the reception, not gossip, not drama. A record of what I witnessed, including the original seating chart, the changed seating placement, Callan's poor housewife remark, Sela and Torin's supporting remarks, and Ms. Say sitting in Mrs. Rove's seat while the humiliation happened." Brielle looked down. The room understood now. This was not a rumor. This was documented. Callan's face hardened. "This is ridiculous." Kara lifted her eyes from the contract. "The owner disagrees. Vera Stone considers leadership character, reputational discipline, and public judgment relevant when deciding whether to release $10 billion to a family-controlled company." Torin pointed toward Osric. "Bring this owner here. Nobody controls my family from the shadows." Osric slowly turned his head. His eyes went past Torin, past Callan, past Sela, past Brielle's shaking hand. He looked toward Maren. Then Kara closed the contract with careful finality. "She has been here the entire time." Every eye in the room turned toward Maren, not slowly, not politely, all at once. 1 second, she had been standing near the flowers in the plain black dress Callan told her to wear so she would not draw attention. The next second, the entire Vera Stone legal team turned toward her with the kind of respect no one in the Rove family had ever given her. The silence was so deep that even the soft music near the champagne tower seemed to disappear. Callan looked from Osric to Maren, then back again, waiting for someone to laugh and explain the mistake. Nobody laughed. Osric stood beside the center table, his hand resting near the revised contract. His face remained calm, but his voice carried through the hall with clean authority. "Mrs. Maren Vale Rove is the controlling owner of Vera Stone Dominion through the Vale Anchor Trust." The room froze. For a moment, Callan only stared at Maren. Then he laughed once, sharp and empty. "No," he said. "No, that is impossible." Maren did not move. Callan looked around the room, searching for someone to agree with him. "She is my wife. She is not a corporate owner. She does not even understand executive finance." Those words might have hurt her once. Now they only proved why this moment had to happen. Kara opened a blue folder and placed certified documents on the table. Each page had seals, signatures, and legal confirmations of ownership. She did not raise her voice. She did not insult anyone. She simply made truth visible. These documents confirm that Maren Vale inherited controlling ownership after the death of her father, Ammon Vale, Kara said. Her interest has been held through the Vale Anchor Trust. The board, chairman, and legal counsel have acted according to the trust structure and ownership protections. The guests began whispering. Brielle's face lost color. Her hand, the same hand wearing the bracelet, dropped slowly to her side. Sela looked as if the room had tilted beneath her heels. Torin's mouth opened, but no words came out. Callan stared at the papers, then at Maren, as if seeing her for the first time and refusing to accept what his eyes were telling him. Maren finally stepped forward. She did not walk like someone seeking revenge. She walked like someone carrying a truth she had kept heavy for too long. The legal team made space for her without being asked. That movement alone crushed the Rove family's last hope that this was some misunderstanding. Maren stopped beside the table. Her eyes went to the contract first. Then to Callan, "I hid my name," she said quietly, "because I wanted to know if the man I married could love me without it." The words struck harder than anger would have. Callan's face changed. The first thing in his eyes was disbelief, then fear, then something worse, memory. He remembered calling her simple. He remembered letting Brielle sit in her chair. He remembered telling her she was not built for rooms like this. He remembered every time he looked past her while begging for a future only she could approve. Maren saw those memories reach him. She did not comfort him. Torin recovered first, or tried to. He straightened his shoulders and forced his voice into the shape of authority. "Family misunderstandings should not interfere with business," he said. "Whatever happened between husband and wife is personal. This deal concerns companies." Maren turned to him. "This is no longer a misunderstanding," she said. "It is a governance risk." Torin's face tightened. That phrase hurt him because it was business language. He could not dismiss it as emotion. He could not call it a wife's mood. He could not bury it under champagne and speeches. Kara stepped forward again. "Vera Stone's concerns are based on evidence, not personal conflict." She opened another file. Consultant payments to Say Image House. Luxury purchases coded as executive presentation accessories. Private hotel stays listed as brand strategy sessions. Misleading debt disclosures. Delayed vendor obligations removed from reports. Internal memos describing a plan to remove Maren Rove from the public family image after Vera Stone's first funding release. Each sentence landed like a door closing. Brielle suddenly lifted her chin. "That is not what it sounds like." Kara looked at her calmly. "Your signature appears on the Say Image House invoices." Brielle's confidence cracked. "I provided image support," she said quickly. Kara turned one page. "Then you should have no issue producing campaign records, strategy briefs, deliverables, media reports, or evidence of completed work." Brielle said nothing. The silence answered for her. Dax stood near the side of the room, pale and sweating. He looked at Torin, then away. He knew the documents were real. He knew the debt was real. He knew the questions Vera Stone had asked were built from the weak places he had helped hide. Sela finally found her voice. "You should have told us," she said, staring at Maren with anger dressed as offense. "You came into this family hiding who you were." Maren looked at her, and for the first time all evening, sadness softened her face. "You did not need to know my wealth to show me respect." No one spoke. That sentence reached every corner of the room. It reached Lena, whose eyes filled with tears. It reached the guests who had laughed weeks earlier or looked away. It reached Callan, who now understood that the woman he had mocked as a poor housewife had been the owner of the company he was desperate to impress. Maren looked at Brielle's bracelet, then at Callan's blue tie, then at the contract on the table. She remembered standing with her father outside a closed factory years ago. Workers had carried boxes from the gates, faces empty with fear. Her father had told her, "Never fund arrogance that eats the innocent." He had explained that executives could lie, hide debt, and still go home rich, while ordinary workers paid for it with their lives and families. That memory became her anchor. She was not there to burn innocent employees because Callan broke her heart. She was there to stop corrupt leaders from using her company's money to protect their pride. Torin took a step toward the table. "We can renegotiate privately," Osric answered before Maren could. "The owner has already decided the conditions required for continued consideration." "Continued consideration?" Torin repeated, his voice cracking. "This was supposed to close." Maren met his eyes. "It was supposed to close if your company told the truth." Callan moved toward her then, no longer smiling, no longer performing for the room. His voice dropped low so only those closest could hear. "You cannot do this to me," he whispered. "I am your husband." Maren looked at him for a long moment. Once that title had meant safety to her, partnership, promise, home. Once she had believed Callan would stand between her and his family's cruelty. Instead, he had used that title as a place to hide while he betrayed her. Her eyes lowered to the revised contract. Then she said softly, "That was the first title you betrayed." Callan went still, and as Kara slid the final signature page across the table, the Rove family finally understood that the real decision had not even begun yet. Torin reached for the contract like he wanted to tear it in half. The room moved before he could touch it. Osric stepped closer to the table. Kara placed one calm hand on the folder. Two members of Vera Stone's legal team shifted beside her, not threatening anyone, but making it clear that the document on the table was no longer part of the Rove family's performance. It was evidence now. Torin's face burned red. "This is a setup," he snapped. You cannot walk into my company's celebration and humiliate my family with personal revenge. Kara did not raise her voice. Vera Stone has no obligation to release $10 billion to a company that submitted misleading disclosures. Torin pointed at Marin. This is because of her. Marin stood still. Kara looked at him with cold professional patience. No. This is because of incomplete debt reports, improper consultant payments, hidden vendor pressure, personal expenses placed under business categories, and internal plans to misrepresent leadership stability after funding. The words were clean, legal, impossible to twist into emotion. Torin opened his mouth again, but nothing useful came out. Callan looked at Marin as if she had become a stranger inside the body of his wife. Brielle stood near him, frozen, one hand covering the diamond bracelet that had once made her look powerful. Seela had lowered herself into a chair, her face pale, her perfect posture gone. The impossible choice sat on the table before all of them. If Rove Harlan refused to sign the revised terms, Vera Stone would withdraw. Creditors would hear within days. Vendors would panic. The company Torin had spent his life decorating with pride would begin to collapse from the inside. If they signed, Callan and Torin would lose control. Brielle's payments would be exposed. Seela's social victory would become public shame. The family would have to admit that the woman they mocked as a poor housewife had been the owner holding their rescue in her hand. Torin turned sharply toward Dax. Say something. Dax looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. His lips moved once, but no sound came out. Then he broke. I sent incomplete numbers, Dax said. The room went still again. Torin's face twisted. Dax. Dax stepped away from him. You told me to keep the delayed vendor reports out of the first submission. You said Vera Stone did not need to see weakness before commitment. You promised me a closing bonus if I kept finance quiet until the first funding release. Gasps moved through the guests. Dax turned toward Kara. I have the emails, the internal schedules, the creditor warnings, everything. Torin stared at him with pure hatred. Dax swallowed. I will cooperate. That removed the last hiding place. The investigation was no longer only documents from Vera Stone. It now had the voice of the man who helped bury the truth. Brielle suddenly stepped backward. I am leaving, she said. Osric turned his eyes to her. You may leave the room, Miss Say, but the invoices under Say Image House will be referred for civil recovery. Brielle's face changed. Civil recovery. Kara answered, funds paid for false consulting work, gifts, private stays, and personal expenses may be recovered. Your signature appears on several invoices. Brielle looked down at the bracelet. For weeks it had been her trophy. In the reception hall it had flashed while Callan and his parents insulted Marin. Now it looked heavy on her wrist, like a chain made of diamonds. Callan whispered, Brielle. She looked at him with panic, not love. You said this was handled. That one sentence told the room everything. Seela covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Her social power was gone. The woman who had moved Marin's chair smiled at her pain and introduced Brielle as Callan's future now sat silent, while every guest understood that she had humiliated the very owner her family needed. Near the side of the room stood a new figure, Ruth Bell, 54, the elected employee's representative for Rove Harlan's operations staff. She had been invited to the celebration for appearance, so the family could pretend workers were part of their victory. Now her eyes were fixed on Marin with fear and hope mixed together. Marin noticed her. That mattered more than Torin's pride. Marin remembered her father again, not in the boardroom this time, but outside a closed factory many years earlier. Workers had carried boxes through the gate. Some held children by the hand. Some stared at the ground because they did not know how to go home and explain that rich men had lied and ordinary families would pay. Her father had said, never fund arrogance that eats the innocent. Now Marin understood why the memory had followed her all these years. She turned to Kara. Add the Employee Protection Amendment before I sign. Kara nodded immediately. Torin blinked. What amendment? Marin looked at Ruth, then back at the contract. Ordinary workers will not lose their jobs because executives lied. Vera Stone will restructure the deal through protected operations, not family control. Payroll, vendor payments, and active projects will be stabilized first. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. That was the moment the room changed again. Marin was not only punishing betrayal, she was saving people who had no part in it. Callan stepped closer to her, his voice dropping into the soft tone he used when he wanted something. Marin, please, we can fix this. Brielle meant nothing. I was under pressure. My parents pushed me. I made mistakes, but we are still married. Marin looked at him without anger. That is what hurts most, she said. You did not betray me once. You built a pattern and called it pressure. You lied. You replaced me in public. You let them laugh. You planned to erase me after using my company. And when I was wounded, you told me to calm down. Callan's eyes reddened. I did not know who you were. Marin's voice stayed soft. You knew I was your wife. He had no answer. Kara placed the amended signature page before Marin. Beside it, she set another folder, a divorce petition and separation authorization. Marin did not make a speech. She removed her wedding ring and placed it gently beside the contract copy. The small sound it made against the table was quieter than a glass breaking, but it ended more than a glass ever could. Then Marin signed. The deal would continue, but not through Callan, not through Torin, not through lies. Under the amended terms, Callan would be removed from executive authority before any funding moved. Torin would step down from operational control. Seela's influence would vanish with the family's image. Brielle would face financial claims and public disgrace. Dax would receive limited cooperation protection, but his career would never look clean again. Marin closed the pen and stepped back. She did not smile. This was not joy, it was freedom. As she walked toward the exit with Kara and Osric beside her, the guests parted without being asked. Behind her, Callan stood frozen beside the same table where he had once allowed everyone to laugh at her. Near the elevator, Lena approached quietly. They finally saw you, Lena said. Marin looked back once, not at Callan, but at the room that had mistaken her humility for nothing. No, she said softly. They finally saw what they needed from me. That is not the same thing. The elevator doors opened. Marin stepped inside, no longer the poor housewife they mocked, but the woman who owned the door they had been begging to enter. And as the doors closed, Kara's phone vibrated with one final message from Vera Stone Compliance. The audit had found a second set of accounts no one had mentioned yet. If loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness, subscribe and comment loyalty.